The stagecoach rattled into Redemption Springs on a blistering August afternoon in 1878, carrying a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Clara Bennett stepped down onto the dusty Main Street with a single carpetbag clutched in her gloved hands, her dark hair pinned severely beneath a simple bonnet, her blue calico dress already wilting in the Nevada heat. She had traveled 3 weeks from Philadelphia, running from the shame of a broken engagement and the suffocating pity of her family, determined to make her own way in a place where nobody knew her name or her failures. The town sprawled before her like a collection of weathered bones bleached by the sun. False-fronted buildings lined both sides of the wide street, their paint peeling in long strips. A saloon called the Silver Dollar dominated one corner, its doors swinging open to release bursts of piano music and raucous laughter. Across the way stood a general store, a bank with iron bars on its windows, and a boarding house with a hand-painted sign that read "Rooms available, respectable ladies only." Clara straightened her shoulders and headed toward it, ignoring the curious stares from the men lounging outside the saloon. She had exactly $23.40 to her name. It would have to last until she found work. The boarding house keeper was a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Abernathy who looked Clara up and down with shrewd gray eyes before naming her terms. $2 a week for room and board, payable in advance, no gentlemen callers, no drinking, and absolutely no working at the saloon or any other establishment of ill repute. Clara paid for 2 weeks and climbed the narrow stairs to a small room that smelled of lye soap and loneliness. She unpacked her few belongings, washed her face in the chipped basin, and went back downstairs to ask Mrs. Abernathy where she might find employment. "What can you do, Mrs.?" Abernathy asked, arms crossed over her ample bosom. "I can read and write, I can do figures. I worked as a governess for 2 years before." Clara let the sentence trail off. Before her employer's son had proposed marriage and then changed his mind 3 weeks before the wedding, claiming she was too independent, too opinionated, not suited for the life he envisioned. "I can sew and cook, I'm a hard worker." Mrs. Abernathy's expression softened slightly. "The schoolteacher position is already filled. You might try the general store, but old Mr. Henderson is tighter than bark on a tree when it comes to wages. There's the Crossed Rivers Ranch about 5 miles north of town. They're always looking for help in the kitchen during roundup season." She paused. "Or you could ask at the newspaper office. Editor's been complaining about needing someone to help with the typesetting and keep the books." Clara chose the newspaper office first. The Redemption Springs Gazette occupied a narrow building wedged between the telegraph office and a saddle shop. The front window displayed the latest edition, its headline trumpeting news of silver strikes in the nearby mountains. A bell jangled as Clara pushed open the door, and she found herself in a cluttered space that smelled of ink and paper and tobacco smoke. A printing press dominated the back wall, and every available surface was covered with stacks of newspapers, books, and loose sheets covered in cramped handwriting. A man emerged from behind the printing press, wiping his ink-stained hands on a rag. He was perhaps 30 years old, with thinning brown hair and spectacles perched on a long nose. "Help you, miss?" "I'm looking for work. Mrs. Abernathy mentioned you might need assistance." The man's eyebrows rose. "You know anything about newspapers?" "I can read, write, and cipher." "I'm detail-oriented and I learn quickly." He studied her for a long moment, then gestured at the chaos around them. "I'm Thomas Whitmore, editor and publisher of this fine establishment. I do everything myself, which means nothing gets done properly. I need someone who can help with typesetting, proofread articles, keep the books, and maybe chase down advertisers who think their money is better spent at the saloon than supporting local journalism." He named a wage that was modest but fair. 6 days a week, Sundays off, start tomorrow if you're interested." Clara felt something loosen in her chest. "I'm very interested, thank you, Mr. Whitmore." "Call me Tom, everyone does." He grinned, and his entire face transformed, becoming almost boyish. "Welcome to the newspaper business, Miss Bennett, Clara Bennett." She left the office with a job and a lightness in her step that she had not felt in months. The sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Clara decided to walk through town to get her bearings before returning to the boarding house for supper. She passed the bank, the assayer's office, a barber shop, and a restaurant called Ma's Kitchen that smelled enticingly of fried chicken and fresh bread. At the edge of town stood a livery stable and blacksmith shop, the ring of hammer on anvil echoing in the still evening air. A man stood in front of the livery, speaking to the blacksmith in a low voice. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. A gun belt rode low on his hips, and his boots were scuffed with hard use. As Clara walked past, he turned his head and she caught a glimpse of his face. Strong-jawed and sun-bronzed, with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Those eyes met hers for just a moment, and she felt an unexpected jolt, like touching a doorknob after crossing a carpeted room in winter. Then she was past him, heart beating faster for no reason she could name, and she hurried back toward the boarding house without looking back. Supper was served at 6 o'clock sharp in a dining room that held 3 small tables. Clara shared the meal with 2 other boarders, a middle-aged woman named Miss Pritchard who taught at the schoolhouse, and a young man named Daniel who worked as a clerk at the bank. The food was simple but well-prepared, and Mrs. Abernathy presided over the table like a benevolent despot, ensuring that everyone ate properly and that conversation remained wholesome. "You'll find Redemption Springs is a decent town," Miss Pritchard said, passing Clara the bowl of mashed potatoes. "We've got our share of rough characters, what with the mines and the cattle drives, but Sheriff Dawson keeps order. And we've got 3 churches, a lending library, and a literary society that meets twice a month. It seems like a good place to make a fresh start," Clara said carefully. "Running from something or running toward something?" Mrs. Abernathy asked bluntly. Clara met her gaze without flinching. "Both, I suppose, Mrs." Abernathy nodded as if that was the answer she had expected. "Most folks who come west are doing the same. Redemption Springs has a way of giving people what they need, if they're willing to work for it." That night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier town, Clara thought about those words. She had come here looking for work, for independence, for a chance to prove that she could survive on her own terms. She had not come looking for love. She was done with love, done with the heartbreak and humiliation it brought. Her future would be built on her own competence and determination, not on the whims of any man. She fell asleep with that resolution firm in her mind. The next morning, Clara arrived at the newspaper office at 8 o'clock to find Tom already at work, setting type for the next edition. He showed her how the printing press operated, explained the layout process, and introduced her to the organized chaos of producing a weekly newspaper. Clara took to the work immediately, her quick mind grasping the technical details, and her careful fingers proving adept at handling the tiny metal letters. By noon, Tom was shaking his head in amazed satisfaction. "You're a natural at this. Where have you been all my life?" Clara laughed. "Philadelphia, mostly." "Well, Philadelphia's loss is Redemption Springs' gain." They worked together through the afternoon, and Clara found herself enjoying the companionship of this easygoing man who loved words and ideas and seemed utterly without pretension. He told her about the town, pointing out the key figures in the community and explaining the complicated politics of mining claims, water rights, and the ongoing tensions between ranchers and farmers. Clara absorbed it all, filing away information that would help her understand her new home. Around 4 o'clock, the door opened and a man walked in, bringing with him the smell of leather and sun-warmed earth. Clara looked up from the typecase and felt her breath catch. It was the man she had seen at the livery stable the previous evening. Up close, he was even more striking, with dark hair that curled slightly over his collar, a mouth that looked like it smiled often, and those extraordinary eyes that were somewhere between brown and gold. "Afternoon, Jack," Tom said, looking up from his work. "Got that advertisement for me?" "Right here." The man pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket and handed it to Tom. His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "Looking for 3 experienced hands for the fall drive. Same terms as last year. I'll run it in this week's edition." Tom glanced at Clara. "Jack, this is Clara Bennett, my new assistant. Clara, meet Jack Thornton. He's foreman at the Crossed Rivers Ranch." Jack removed his hat, revealing that dark hair, and nodded politely to Clara. "Ma'am, welcome to Redemption Springs." "Thank you, Mr. Thornton. Just Jack, if you please. We don't stand much on formality out here." He smiled, and Clara felt that strange jolt again, stronger this time. "You're new to town. What brings you to our little corner of Nevada?" "I came looking for work." Something flickered in those golden-brown eyes. "Did you find it?" "I did." "Then I'd say you're off to a good start." He turned back to Tom. "Send the bill out to the ranch like usual. I'll settle up next time I'm in town." "Will do. How's the herd looking?" "Good. We should have about 1,500 head ready for market come October." Jack replaced his hat, nodded once more to Clara, and headed for the door. Just before stepping out, he paused and looked back at her. "Sometimes when you come to a place looking for one thing, you end up finding something else entirely. Something you didn't even know you needed." He smiled again, tipped his hat, and was gone, leaving Clara staring after him with her heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm. Tom chuckled. "Don't mind Jack. He's got a philosophical streak a mile wide. Good man, though. Best foreman the Crossed Rivers has ever had, and old Mr. Patterson trusts him completely. Half the ranch hands worship him, and the other half would follow him into hell if he asked." Clara turned back to her work, trying to ignore the warm flush in her cheeks. "He seems very sure of himself. He's earned the right to be. Came out here from Texas about 6 years ago with nothing but his saddle and his horse. Worked his way up from common cowhand to foreman through sheer competence and determination. The men respect him because he never asks them to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and he's fair to a fault." Tom selected another handful of type. "He's also single, in case you were wondering." "I wasn't," Clara said firmly. "Of course not." Tom's eyes twinkled behind his spectacles. "Just thought I'd mention it." Clara focused intently on the typecase, but her mind kept drifting back to Jack Thornton's words. "Sometimes when you come to a place looking for one thing, you end up finding something else entirely." She pushed the thought away. She had come here for work, for independence, for a fresh start, not for romance. Not for another chance to have her heart broken. The week passed quickly, as Clara settled into the rhythms of her new life. She learned the intricacies of the printing press, mastered the art of typesetting, and began to understand the pulse of the town through the stories and advertisements that crossed her desk. Tom proved to be an excellent employer, patient with her questions and appreciative of her contributions. By Friday, he was letting her proofread his articles, and even suggesting she might try writing some shorter pieces herself. On Sunday, Clara attended services at the Methodist Church, and then spent the afternoon exploring the countryside around town. She walked north along the main road, enjoying the stark beauty of the Nevada landscape. The mountains rose in the distance like ancient sentinels, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. Sagebrush stretched in every direction, dotted with occasional stands of juniper and pine. The sky was so blue it hurt to look at directly, and the air smelled of dust and wild herbs and possibility. She was perhaps 3 miles from town when she heard the thunder of hoofbeats behind her. Clara stepped off the road and turned to see a group of riders approaching at a fast gallop. As they drew closer, she recognized Jack Thornton in the lead, sitting his horse with the easy grace of a man born to the saddle. He saw her and raised a hand, slowing his mount and pulling off the road. The other riders continued on toward town, calling out farewells as they passed. Jack swung down from his horse and approached Clara on foot, leading the animal by the reins. "Miss Bennett, you're a long way from town. I wanted to see the country. I've never been this far west before. What do you think of it?" Clara looked out at the vast landscape, considering her answer. "It's beautiful, but in a way that's completely different from anything I've known. Everything is so open, so exposed. Back east, there are trees everywhere and you can't see very far in any direction. Out here, it feels like you can see forever." "That's exactly it," Jack said, his face lighting up with pleasure. "That's why I came west. Back in Texas, I felt hemmed in by expectations and family obligations and all the things I was supposed to be. Out here, a man can see the horizon and know he's got room to become whatever he's capable of being." He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry. I tend to run on when I get going on my favorite subjects. Don't apologize. I understand exactly what you mean." Clara surprised herself with her honesty. "I came here to escape expectations too. Everyone back home had such definite ideas about who I should be and what I should want. I needed a place where I could figure out my own answers." Jack studied her with those keen eyes, and Clara had the unsettling feeling that he could see straight through to her core. "Seems like we've got something in common, then. Seems like we do." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, and then Jack said, "Would you like to see the ranch? It's only about 2 miles further up this road. I could show you around a bit, and then ride you back to town before dark." Clara knew she should decline. She knew that accepting would be opening a door that she had firmly resolved to keep closed. But the afternoon sun was warm on her shoulders, and Jack's smile was kind and genuine, and some reckless part of her that she had thought died with her broken engagement suddenly stirred back to life. "I'd like that very much." Jack helped her up onto his horse and then swung up behind her, his arms circling her waist to hold her steady. Clara had never been so close to a man outside of dancing, and she was intensely aware of his solid warmth at her back, the strength of the arm around her middle, the steady rhythm of his breathing. The horse moved into an easy canter, and they rode together through the high desert afternoon toward the Crossed Rivers Ranch. The ranch buildings came into view as they crested a low rise. A substantial house built of logs and stone stood at the center, surrounded by barns, corrals, and bunkhouses. Cattle dotted the grasslands beyond, hundreds of them grazing peacefully under the watchful eyes of mounted cowboys. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods that provided precious shade. It was a working ranch, rough-edged and practical, but there was a sense of permanence about it that spoke of deep roots and long-term planning. Jack helped Clara down from the horse and led her on a tour of the property. Introducing her to the ranch hands, they encountered and explaining the operation with obvious pride. He showed her the new barn they were building, the corral where they broke the young horses, and the creek that gave the ranch its name because it was fed by 2 separate streams that joined just above the property line. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Clara found herself asking questions and genuinely interested in the answers. They ended up sitting on the porch of the main house, drinking cold water drawn from the well and watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains. The ranch owner, Mr. Patterson, was away visiting his daughter in Virginia City, but the housekeeper brought out fresh bread and butter and left them to their conversation. "Why did you leave Texas?" Clara asked, emboldened by the intimacy of the fading light. Jack was quiet for a long moment. "My father had plans for me. He wanted me to take over the family ranch, marry the daughter of his business partner, and live the life he had mapped out for me down to the smallest detail. The problem was, none of it was what I wanted. The girl was nice enough, but we had nothing in common and I didn't love her. The ranch would have been a burden, not a joy. And I knew that if I stayed, I'd end up living someone else's dream instead of my own." He looked at her directly. "So I left. Broke my father's heart, disappointed everyone who had expectations of me, and rode west with almost nothing to my name. Best decision I ever made. Do you regret it? Not for a single moment. Out here, I've built something real. I've earned every bit of respect I've got, and nobody can take that away from me. I'm my own man." He paused. "What about you? What are you running from?" Clara found herself telling him the whole story. About the engagement, the humiliation of being rejected, the suffocating pity of her family and friends. About her determination to prove she could survive on her own, to build a life that depended on nobody but herself. Jack listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face, and when she finished, he nodded slowly. "Sounds like the man was a fool. You're better off without him." "That's what I keep telling myself. It's the truth. Anyone who would reject you for being independent and opinionated doesn't deserve you in the first place." He smiled. "Those are qualities to be admired, not criticized." Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "You really believe that?" "I really do. Out here, independence isn't just admired, it's required. And strong opinions backed up by clear thinking are valuable, whether they come from a man or a woman." He stood up and offered her his hand. "Come on, we should head back before it gets full dark. Mrs. Abernathy will have my hide if I return you after proper hours." The ride back to town was slower, both of them reluctant to end the afternoon. Jack told her stories about his early days as a cowboy, the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. Clara found herself laughing more than she had in months, and she noticed that Jack seemed to sit a little straighter when he managed to draw a smile from her. By the time they reached the boarding house, the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Jack helped Clara down from the horse and stood looking at her in the lamplight spilling from the boarding house windows. "I'd like to see you again if you're willing." Clara knew she should say no. She had come here to avoid exactly this kind of complication. But Jack's eyes were so hopeful, and her heart was beating so fast, and the afternoon had been so perfectly, unexpectedly wonderful. "I'd like that too." His smile was like sunrise. "How about next Sunday? There's a spot up in the foothills where you can see the whole valley spread out like a map. I'd like to show it to you." "Next Sunday, then." Clara watched him ride away into the darkness and then turned to find Mrs. Abernathy standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and an expression that was equal parts disapproval and satisfaction. "Jack Thornton is a good man," the older woman said without preamble. "One of the best, but if you're not serious about courting, you shouldn't encourage him. He deserves better than to be toyed with." "I'm not toying with him," Clara said, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. I didn't come here looking for this." "Nobody ever does, dear. But love has a way of finding us whether we're looking or not." Mrs. Abernathy's expression softened. "Just be honest with him and with yourself, that's all I ask." Over the following weeks, Clara found herself caught in a delicate dance between her determination to remain independent and her growing feelings for Jack Thornton. They saw each other every Sunday, and Jack began finding excuses to come into town during the week. He would stop by the newspaper office with advertisements for the ranch, or he would happen to be at the general store when Clara was shopping, or he would offer to walk her home from church. Each encounter left Clara more confused and more captivated. Tom noticed, of course, and teased her gently about it. "Jack's smitten, and unless I'm much mistaken, so are you." "I didn't come here for this," Clara said, echoing her words to Mrs. Abernathy. "I came here to prove I could make it on my own. And you have. You're doing excellent work, and you've established yourself as a valued member of this community in just a few weeks." Tom set down the type he was holding and looked at her seriously. "But Clara, being independent doesn't mean you have to be alone. It means you have the freedom to choose your own path, including choosing to share that path with someone else. What if I choose wrong again? What if you choose right this time?" Clara had no answer for that. In mid-September, the Crossed Rivers Ranch held a barn dance to celebrate the end of Roundup. The entire town was invited, and Clara went with Miss Pritchard and Mrs. Abernathy, telling herself she was going for the community experience, not because she knew Jack would be there. The new barn had been swept clean and decorated with paper lanterns, and a four-piece band played lively music that had couples whirling across the makeshift dance floor. Long tables held food contributed by every ranch wife within 20 miles, and the air was filled with laughter and conversation, and the stomp of boots keeping time with the music. Jack found Clara almost immediately, his face lighting up when he saw her. He looked different tonight, dressed in clean trousers and a pressed white shirt, his hair neatly combed and his boots polished. But his smile was the same, warm and genuine and completely focused on her. "Dance with me," he asked, offering his hand. Clara took it and let him lead her onto the floor. She had not danced since her broken engagement, and she had forgotten the simple joy of moving to music with a partner who knew how to lead. Jack was an excellent dancer, guiding her through the steps with easy confidence. They danced one song and then another, and then Jack pulled her outside into the cool night air, both of them laughing and breathless. They walked away from the barn, toward the creek where the cottonwoods rustled in the breeze. The music followed them, softer now, and the stars overhead were brilliant in the clear desert sky. Jack found a fallen log near the water and they sat down, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I need to tell you something," Jack said quietly. Clara's heart clenched. Here it comes, she thought, the moment when he realizes I'm too damaged, too difficult, too much work. "I know you came here looking for independence, not for romance. I know you've been hurt and you're wary of trusting again, and I respect that, Clara, I truly do." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "But I've got to be honest with you. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I've been falling since the first moment I saw you walking past the livery stable. And I need you to know that, even if it scares you off, because I can't keep pretending this is just casual friendship." Clara's breath caught in her throat. Every instinct told her to pull away, to protect herself, to refuse this gift before it could be taken away. But Tom's words echoed in her mind. "What if you choose right this time?" "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know, so am I." Jack took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. "Love is always a risk, Clara. There's no guarantee it will work out. But I promise you this. I will never try to change you or diminish you or make you into something you're not. I love you exactly as you are, strong opinions and independence and all. If you'll have me, I want to build a life with you where we're partners in every sense of the word." "That's not how marriage works," Clara said, but her voice was uncertain. "The man makes the decisions and the wife obeys. That's how some marriages work. It doesn't have to be how ours works." He squeezed her hand. "Clara, I've spent 6 years building something I'm proud of. I'm not looking for someone to keep house and bear children and fade into the background. I'm looking for a partner, an equal, someone who will challenge me and stand beside me and build a future with me. I think you're that person. In fact, I'm sure of it." Clara looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and hope and love. She thought about the past weeks, about how Jack had never once tried to tell her what to do or how to think. He asked her opinions and listened to her answers. He valued her mind as much as her appearance. He encouraged her work at the newspaper and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and ideas. He was nothing like her former fiancé, nothing like the men she had known back east who saw women as decorative additions to their own ambitions. "I didn't come here looking for love," she said slowly. "But maybe you're right, maybe sometimes you find both at once, work and love, independence and partnership." Jack's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "So you'll give us a chance?" "I'm terrified," Clara admitted, "but yes, I'll give us a chance." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Clara felt the last walls around her heart begin to crumble. She kissed him back, pouring into it all the hope and fear and wonder she was feeling, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were trembling. "I love you, Clara Bennett," Jack said softly. "I love you too, Jack Thornton." The words felt like freedom. They sat by the creek for a long time, talking about the future they might build together. Jack spoke of his dreams for the ranch, his hope that Mr. Patterson might eventually sell him a partnership in the crossed rivers. Clara talked about her work at the newspaper, her desire to perhaps write more substantial articles about the territory and its people. They made no concrete plans, but the conversation felt like laying the foundation for a shared life, and Clara discovered that the prospect excited rather than frightened her. Over the following months, their courtship deepened and solidified. Jack came into town every Sunday without fail, and they spent long afternoons exploring the countryside, talking about everything and nothing. He introduced her to his favorite places: a hidden spring in the foothills where wildflowers bloomed in improbable profusion, a rocky outcrop that provided a perfect view of the valley, a grove of aspens that turned gold in October like a splash of sunset against the mountain. Clara shared her world with him too, reading him articles from Eastern newspapers, discussing books and ideas, showing him the stories she was beginning to write for the Gazette. Tom published her first article in November, a piece about the challenges facing women who came west alone. It was thoughtful and well-researched and honest, and the response from the community was overwhelmingly positive. Several women sought Clara out to share their own stories, and she began to see how her words could matter, could make a difference. Jack was proud of her in a way that never felt patronizing, and he made sure everyone at the ranch knew that his girl was a published writer. In December, Jack asked Mr. Patterson if he could speak with him privately. The older man had been watching the relationship develop with quiet approval, and when Jack explained that he wanted to ask Clara to marry him but needed to be able to offer her a real future, Mr. Patterson made him an offer that left Jack speechless. He would sell Jack a 25% partnership in the Crossed Rivers Ranch, with the understanding that Jack would eventually inherit full ownership since Patterson had no sons, and his daughters had no interest in ranching. The terms were generous, and Jack would be able to pay them off over time from his earnings. It was everything Jack had worked toward, everything he had dreamed of. He went into town the next day with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, the one piece of family history he had brought with him from Texas. He found Clara at the newspaper office, bundled in a heavy shawl against the winter chill, working on an article about the upcoming territorial elections. She looked up when he entered, and her smile was bright enough to warm the entire room. "Jack, I wasn't expecting you today. I couldn't wait until Sunday." He crossed the room and took both her hands in his. "Clara Bennett, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You've made me happier these past few months than I've ever been in my life. You challenge me and inspire me and make me want to be a better man. I know we haven't been courting very long, but I'm sure about this. I'm sure about you. I'm sure about us." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Will you marry me?" Will you be my partner in life, my equal in all things, my best friend and my love? Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Yes, oh Jack, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he stood up and kissed her, and Tom whooped from somewhere behind the printing press, making them both laugh. They were married in February 1879, in the Methodist church with half the town in attendance. Clara wore a simple cream-colored dress that she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Jack wore a new suit that he was clearly uncomfortable in, but his eyes never left Clara's face during the entire ceremony. Miss Pritchard cried, Mrs. Abernathy looked satisfied, and Tom stood up as best man, beaming with pride. Mr. Patterson gave Clara away, having appointed himself her Western father, and his wife had helped her prepare for the wedding with warmth and genuine affection. The reception was held at the Crossed Rivers Ranch, and it was a joyous affair with music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. Cowboys from surrounding ranches came to wish Jack well, and townspeople mingled with ranch hands in a celebration that lasted well into the night. When Clara and Jack finally escaped to the small house that Mr. Patterson had given them as a wedding gift, built just a quarter-mile from the main ranch house, they were exhausted and happy and full of hope for the future. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Clara continued to work at the newspaper 3 days a week, and Jack's schedule as foreman was demanding and often unpredictable. They had to learn to navigate the daily realities of sharing a life, of compromise and communication and patience. But they faced every challenge together, talking through disagreements and supporting each other through difficulties. Jack never once asked Clara to give up her work, and Clara learned to understand the rhythms of ranch life and the obligations that came with Jack's position. She also discovered that she loved the ranch, loved the wide-open spaces and the honest work, and the sense of community among the ranch hands and their families. She started a small lending library in one of the unused buildings, collecting books from town and making them available to anyone on the ranch who wanted to read. She taught some of the younger cowboys to write letters home to their families, and she helped the ranch cook plan menus and order supplies. She found ways to contribute that used her skills and intelligence, and Jack encouraged every one of her initiatives. In the spring of 1880, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She had seen too many women die in childbirth, and the nearest doctor was in Virginia City, a hard day's ride away. But Jack was steadfast in his support, and Mrs. Patterson took Clara under her wing, sharing the wisdom of her own 4 successful pregnancies. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Clara continued working at the newspaper until she was too uncomfortable to stand at the typecase for long hours. Their son was born in November 1880, a healthy baby boy with Jack's dark hair and Clara's blue eyes. They named him Samuel, after Jack's grandfather, and he was welcomed into the world with love and celebration. Clara took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, and Jack was a devoted father, often found walking the floor at night with Samuel in his arms, singing old cowboy songs in a surprisingly sweet voice. Tom hired a new assistant to help at the newspaper while Clara was occupied with the baby, but she continued to write articles from home, and Tom published every one of them. She wrote about motherhood on the frontier, about the challenges of raising children so far from civilization, about the resourcefulness of Western women. Her articles were reprinted in newspapers throughout the territory, and she began to receive letters from readers who appreciated her honest perspective. When Samuel was 6 months old, Mr. Patterson's health began to decline. He had always been robust, but a hard fall from a horse seemed to take something out of him that never fully recovered. Over the next year, he gradually transferred more and more responsibility to Jack, until Jack was running the ranch in all but name. In the summer of 1882, Mr. Patterson called Jack and Clara to the main house and told them he was revising his will. The ranch would go to Jack upon his death, with the stipulation that Clara would have equal say in all major decisions. He wanted it understood that Jack's success was due in no small part to Clara's support and partnership, and he believed the ranch would thrive best with both of them at the helm. Mr. Patterson died peacefully in his sleep that September, mourned by everyone who had known him. His daughters came for the funeral and agreed wholeheartedly with their father's wishes. They had lives and families in the city, and no desire to run a cattle ranch. They signed over their inheritance rights in exchange for a fair financial settlement, and Jack and Clara found themselves the owners of the Crossed Rivers Ranch. It was a huge responsibility, but they rose to meet it together. Jack managed the daily operations, the cattle drives, the hiring and training of ranch hands. Clara kept the books, managed the finances, corresponded with buyers and suppliers, and made sure the household ran smoothly. They made major decisions together, discussing options and weighing consequences before committing to a course of action. The ranch prospered under their joint management, and their reputation grew throughout the territory. In the spring of 1883, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less frightened and more confident, and the pregnancy was even easier than the first. Their daughter was born in December 1883, a tiny, perfect girl with Clara's features and Jack's golden brown eyes. They named her Rose, and Samuel was enchanted with his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding times. As the children grew, Clara and Jack worked to create a home that balanced work and family, responsibility and joy. They taught Samuel and Rose to ride almost as soon as they could walk, and both children grew up at home in the saddle. Clara homeschooled them, using her skills as a former governess to provide a solid education that rivaled anything they might have received back east. Jack taught them about ranching, about respecting the land and the animals, about the value of honest work and fair dealing. The years passed with the steady rhythm of ranch life. There were good years and hard years, times of plenty and times of struggle. A harsh winter in 1886 killed nearly a third of their cattle, and they had to scramble to recover financially. A drought in 1888 tested everyone's endurance, and they survived only through careful planning and community cooperation. But there were also years of abundance, successful drives to market, and the satisfaction of watching their children grow strong and capable. Tom remained a close friend, and Clara continued to write for the Gazette even as her responsibilities on the ranch expanded. Her articles evolved over the years, reflecting her deepening understanding of the West and its people. She wrote about the changing face of the frontier, about the coming of the railroad and what it meant for places like Redemption Springs, about the delicate balance between progress and preservation. Her writing gained her a regional reputation, and she was occasionally invited to speak at women's groups and civic organizations. In 1890, Wyoming became a state and granted women the right to vote. Clara wrote a passionate article about what this meant for Western women, and the piece was reprinted in newspapers throughout the region. She began to correspond with suffragists in other territories, and she became a quiet but effective advocate for women's rights. Jack supported her completely, often pointing out that Clara was living proof that women could be equal partners in every aspect of life. Samuel grew into a young man who combined his father's practical skills with his mother's intellectual curiosity. He loved the ranch, but also loved books and learning, and he talked about perhaps studying agriculture at the new land-grant college in Nevada. Rose was fearless and independent, as comfortable roping cattle as she was working through advanced mathematics. She declared at age 10 that she was going to be a rancher like her parents, and nobody who knew her doubted it for a moment. In 1893, Clara and Jack celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. The children were staying overnight with friends in town, giving them a rare evening alone together. They sat on the porch of their house as the sun set, just as they had done on countless other evenings, and reflected on the years that had passed. "Do you ever regret it?" Jack asked, his arm around Clara's shoulders. "Giving up the life you might have had back east, the cities and culture and society," Clara laughed. "Not for a single moment. I have everything I need right here. Meaningful work, a home I love, children who make me proud every single day, and you." She leaned into his warmth. "I came here looking for work, not for love." "But you were right all along." "About what?" "Sometimes you find both at once. And when you do, if you're smart enough to recognize it and brave enough to embrace it, you end up with a life richer than you ever imagined possible." Jack kissed the top of her head. "I'm the lucky one, Clara. You took a chance on a dusty cowboy with big dreams and no guarantees. You helped me build something real and lasting. You gave me a family and a partnership and a love that gets stronger every year. I can't imagine my life without you. Good thing you don't have to." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, one by one, in the darkening sky. The ranch was quiet around them, the cattle settled for the night, the horses drowsing in their corrals. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and another answered. It was the sound of the West, wild and free and beautiful. Over the following years, Clara and Jack watched their children grow into adults who made their own choices and followed their own paths. Samuel did go to agricultural college, returning with new ideas about land management and cattle breeding that he implemented on the ranch with excellent results. He married a schoolteacher from Virginia City in 1896, a sharp-minded young woman named Elizabeth, who reminded Clara very much of herself at that age. Rose proved to be a natural rancher, with an instinct for cattle and an ability to command respect from even the most hardened cowboys. She took over more and more of the daily operations as Jack began to slow down in his 50s. In 1898, Samuel and Elizabeth had their first child, a daughter they named Clara in honor of her grandmother. The sight of Jack holding his granddaughter, his face soft with wonder and love, brought tears to Clara's eyes. They were grandparents now, entering a new phase of life, and the joy of it surprised them both with its intensity. Clara continued to write, though she focused more on longer pieces now, essays and even a memoir about her experiences coming west and building a life on the frontier. A publisher in San Francisco expressed interest in collecting her articles into a book, and she spent several months revising and organizing the material. A Woman's West, Reflections on Independence and Love was published in 1900 to favorable reviews, and Clara found herself a minor celebrity, receiving letters from women across the country who had been inspired by her story. Tom retired from the newspaper in 1902, selling the Gazette to a young journalist from Denver. But he remained in Redemption Springs, and he and Clara continued their friendship, meeting weekly to discuss books and politics and the changing world around them. He told her once that she was the best decision he had ever made, hiring her all those years ago when she was just a young woman looking for work and a fresh start. Jack's health remained good well into his 60s, though he finally agreed to let Rose and Samuel take over most of the hard physical labor of running the ranch. He spent his days consulting on major decisions, working with the horses he loved, and playing with his growing number of grandchildren. By 1905, there were 4 of them, 2 from Samuel and Elizabeth, and 2 from Rose, who had married one of the ranch hands in 1903. A quiet, capable man named James who treated her as an equal partner just as Jack had always treated Clara. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1909, Clara and Jack threw a celebration at the ranch that rivaled their original wedding reception. Half the territory seemed to show up, and the party lasted for 2 days. There were speeches and toasts and more food than an army could eat. Tom gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry, talking about the day Clara had walked into his newspaper office looking for work, and how she had changed not just Jack's life but the entire community. Mrs. Abernathy, now in her 80s but still sharp as a tack, stood up and announced that she had known from the very beginning that Clara and Jack were meant for each other, and that young people should always listen to their elders. Clara and Jack danced together under the stars, just as they had at their wedding and at that long-ago barn dance where Jack had first told her he was falling in love. They moved more slowly now, their bodies marked by 3 decades of hard work and living, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. 30 years, Clara murmured against Jack's shoulder. Has it really been that long? Best 30 years of my life, and I'm hoping for at least 30 more, Clara laughed. We'll be in our 90s. So, we'll be in our 90s together, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, still running this ranch and still making decisions as partners. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes still that same warm golden brown that had captivated her all those years ago. Still think you made the right choice, giving that dusty cowboy a chance. Best decision I ever made. Clara stood on her toes to kiss him, and around them, their family and friends cheered and applauded. The years continued to roll by with the steady certainty of the seasons. Clara and Jack aged gracefully, their hair turning silver, their steps slowing, but their minds remaining sharp and their love remaining constant. They handed over more and more responsibility to their children, trusting them to carry on the legacy they had built together. But they remained active in the ranch's operations and in the community, offering wisdom and experience when asked, but never imposing their views. Clara's book went through several printings, and she received letters from readers well into her 70s. Many of them were from young women who had been inspired by her story to seek their own adventures and build their own independent lives. She answered every letter personally, encouraging them to be brave, to trust themselves, and to never settle for less than they deserved. In 1920, when Clara was 65 and Jack was 68, the 19th Amendment was ratified, granting women the right to vote throughout the United States. Clara cast her ballot in the November election with tears streaming down her face, remembering all the years she had fought for this moment, all the articles she had written, all the conversations she had had with women who believed they would never see this day. Jack stood beside her, his hand in hers, proud and supportive to the end. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1929, just months before the stock market crash that would herald the Great Depression. The ranch had weathered economic hardships before, and with Samuel and Rose managing the operations, it would weather this one too. The anniversary celebration was quieter than the 30th had been, just family and close friends gathering at the ranch house for a dinner and reminiscences. Clara and Jack sat at the head of the table, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and several great-grandchildren, and looked at the life they had built with satisfaction and gratitude. "I came to Redemption Springs looking for work," Clara said during the toasts. "I was running from heartbreak and humiliation, determined to prove I could make it on my own. I had sworn off love, convinced it would only bring more pain." She looked at Jack, her eyes bright with tears. "And then this cowboy told me that sometimes you find both at once, work and love. Independence and partnership, He was right. He's been right about so many things over the past 50 years. She raised her glass. To Jack, my partner in everything, my equal, my best friend, and the love of my life. Thank you for teaching me that I could be strong and independent and still fall in love. Thank you for showing me what true partnership looks like. Thank you for 50 years of happiness. Jack wiped his eyes and raised his own glass. To Clara, who took a chance on a cowboy with big dreams. Who built this ranch with me, raised our children with me, and made every single day an adventure. You're the strongest, smartest, most amazing woman I've ever known, and I fall more in love with you every single day. They kissed, and their family erupted in applause and cheers, and the celebration continued late into the night. Clara and Jack lived out their remaining years in contentment, watching their family grow and their legacy spread through the generations. The Crossed Rivers Ranch thrived under Samuel and Rose's management, adapting to changing times while holding true to the principles of fair dealing and hard work that Jack and Clara had established. The ranch became known throughout the West as a model of progressive management and family partnership. Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1937 at the age of 82, with Jack holding her hand. She had lived a full and remarkable life, leaving behind a family that adored her, a community that respected her, and a body of written work that continued to inspire women across the country. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people, from ranch hands to state legislators, all of whom had been touched by her wisdom, her kindness, and her fierce commitment to equality and justice. Jack followed her just 6 months later, dying in the same bed they had shared for 58 years. His last words were her name, spoken with love and longing, and those who were with him at the end said he died with a smile on his face, as if he could already see her waiting for him. He was buried beside Clara on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under the wide western sky that they had both loved so much. Their gravestone was simple, bearing both their names and dates, and below that, a single line that Samuel had chosen: partners in life and love. But everyone who had known them understood that those simple words could not begin to capture the richness of their relationship or the depth of their love. They had been two people who came west looking for fresh starts, who found each other against all odds, and who built a life together that exemplified the best of what partnership could be. The Crossed Rivers Ranch remained in the family for generations, each new generation adding their own chapter to the story that Clara and Jack had begun. Their descendants carried on the tradition of equal partnership and progressive thinking, and many of them became leaders in their own communities, fighting for justice and equality just as Clara had done. Her book remained in print for decades, and her articles were studied by historians interested in the experience of women on the frontier. But perhaps their greatest legacy was the simple truth that they had lived and proved: that independence and love were not opposing forces, but complementary ones. That true partnership required respect and equality, and the courage to challenge old assumptions. That sometimes, when you come to a new place looking for one thing, you find something far more precious: work and love, freedom and commitment, individual strength and shared purpose. Clara and Jack had found it all, built it together, and left behind a legacy that would inspire generations to come. They had come west as separate individuals seeking their own paths, and they had become something greater together than either could have been alone. And that, in the end, was the truest measure of their success and their love.